You really think I'd turn down this opportunity? For you? Her voice carried over the chatter of the cafe, sharp enough to make the man at the next table pause mid-sip. Marissa Delacroix didn't whisper, she wanted the whole room to hear. She leaned back in her chair like she was delivering a punchline, lips curled into a smile I'd never seen aimed at me before. In her perfectly manicured hands was my leather-bound portfolio, 3 years of my designs, sketches, swatches and prototypes, resting casually against the marble tabletop as if it were hers. The man sitting across from her, an impeccably dressed talent scout with a silver watch that probably cost more than my monthly rent, flipped through the pages. He nodded in quiet approval. "You've got a sharp eye," he said. "This is strong work. Unique." Marissa didn't blink. "Thank you. I've poured myself into every single piece. Every single piece. Like I hadn't spent countless nights hunched over my sewing machine until my fingers cramped, like I hadn't skipped birthdays and holidays to finish that last stitch before dawn." I stood there by the coffee counter, frozen, gripping the cardboard cup so hard I thought it would crumple. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of spoons against ceramic. Every sound felt muted under the rushing in my ears. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Either way, she was erasing me in real time and the scout was buying every word. My name is Callie Morgan, and until that moment I believed Marissa was my best friend. My sister in everything but blood. We'd survived college together, shared apartments with paper-thin walls, pulled each other out of heartbreaks and late-night creative blocks. We'd made a pact in the middle of a snowstorm during sophomore year. No matter what, we rise together. Apparently, we had just been optional. The scout closed the portfolio and smiled. "There's a mentorship in Los Angeles I think you'd be perfect for. 3 months. All expenses paid. Connections that could change your life." My life. The one I had planned for, fought for. Except now it was hers. Marissa's smile widened. I'd be honored. No mention of me. Not even a glance. I wanted to shout, to call her out right there in front of everyone. But my throat felt locked. Instead, I stood rooted to the spot, my heartbeat pounding against my ribs like it wanted to break free. When the meeting wrapped, she hugged the scout, tucking my portfolio under her arm like a trophy. She finally looked at me as she passed the counter, her expression unreadable except for the tiniest flicker in her eyes. A warning. That evening, I walked home through the drizzle, Portland's streetlights blurring into hazy gold circles on the wet pavement. My apartment above the bakery smelled faintly of cinnamon and yeast, normally comforting but now cloying. I tossed my soaked coat onto the chair, sat at my work table and stared at the empty space where my portfolio should have been. Every design I'd created in the last 3 years was in Marissa's hands now. I thought about the moments we'd shared, the midnight ramen runs, the whispered encouragements before a big presentation, the stupid inside jokes that no one else would get. Somewhere along the line, I'd mistaken shared dreams for shared loyalty. The betrayal wasn't just about the designs. It was about me. I had turned down an assistant designer position in New York just 2 months ago because she told me we'd have a better shot together here. She'd cried on my couch about not being ready to face the industry alone, and I'd believed her. I'd stayed for her. And now, she'd taken everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. "Big day. Let's talk tomorrow. Drinks on me." As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't just watched her step into my future and slam the door behind her. The first time I saw Marissa Delacroix, she was balancing on the arm of a threadbare couch in the dorm lounge, wearing a pair of combat boots 2 sizes too big and reciting lines from some obscure French play. She had everyone's attention, laughing, teasing, pulling people into her orbit like gravity. I was sitting in the corner, sketchbook open on my knees, pretending to focus on the curve of a collar I was drawing. But really I was watching her. It wasn't just the way she looked. Although with her dark waves piled into a messy knot and a swipe of crimson lipstick, she could have stepped out of a magazine. It was the way she moved, like every hallway was a runway and every stranger was already an old friend. I was the opposite. Quiet, deliberate, always observing before stepping into the conversation. But somehow that night she came over to me. "You're the girl with the sketches," she said, dropping onto the couch beside me like we'd known each other for years. "Callie," I managed, unsure whether she was mocking or genuinely curious. She smiled. "I'm Marissa. And we're going to make something amazing together." We became inseparable in the months that followed. She was the vision, I was the hands. She dreamed big and loud, and I made those dreams real with fabric, thread, and sleepless nights. When our design professors paired us for a final year project, the result was a collection that had half the faculty buzzing. We didn't win the competition, but we walked away convinced that together, we'd take on the fashion world. After graduation, we moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Providence, splitting rent we could barely afford. We'd spend mornings at our part-time jobs, hers in a boutique, mine at a fabric store, and evenings in the apartment cutting patterns on the living room floor. It was exhausting, but it felt like building something that was ours. 2 years later, she suggested we relocate to Portland. More indie, more room for new voices, she said. I followed without hesitation because that's what I did when Marissa had a vision. When the opportunity for the Pacific Northwest Fashion Expo came up, it felt like destiny. We didn't have the money for all the materials, so I sold my grandmother's sewing machine, the one she taught me on when I was 9, and used the cash for silk, lace, and hand-beaded appliques. We told each other it was worth it. This would be the moment. But somewhere between late-night sewing sessions and endless fittings, I noticed subtle changes. She'd refer to my designs instead of our designs when talking to boutique owners. She'd post photos on Instagram that cropped me out entirely. I told myself it didn't matter, that she was just branding. Then came the New York offer. An assistant designer position for a label I'd dreamed of working for since high school. The email sat in my inbox for 2 days before I told her. She gasped, then gripped my hands. "You can't go," she'd said, eyes wide, voice urgent. "This expo is everything we've worked for. You leave now, it all falls apart." I turned down the offer. She hugged me tight, murmuring, "You won't regret this." Now I couldn't stop thinking about those words, echoing against the hollow in my chest. The rain started again outside my window, the kind of steady Portland drizzle that soaks you without you noticing. I sat at my work table, staring at the empty space where my portfolio had been. The hum of the bakery's ovens below vibrated through the floor. In the quiet, I could almost hear the sound of her voice from that afternoon in the cafe, bright and confident, erasing me in front of a stranger. Some part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation. That she'd hand back the portfolio tomorrow and say it had all been a misunderstanding. But deep down I knew. Marissa didn't make mistakes. She made choices. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay on my back staring at the cracks in the ceiling, tracing them like fault lines. Somewhere below, the bakery ovens kicked on, sending up waves of warm air that smelled faintly of cardamom. Normally that scent made me feel safe, tethered to the world. Tonight it was just background noise. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in that cafe. The way she'd leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low enough to feel intimate but loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. I've poured myself into every single piece. I turned onto my side, curling into the thin quilt I'd had since college. I thought about the years we'd spent building our dream. How many of those late nights were mine alone? How many of those collaborations she'd claimed credit for in casual conversation? The truth was, I'd let her take those little things because I believed the big things would be ours together. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It wasn't a text from her this time. It was an Instagram notification. Marissa had posted a photo from that afternoon. Her in the cafe, portfolio spread open, coffee cup artfully positioned beside it. Caption read, "Can't wait to show LA what I've been working on for the past 3 years. Dreams do come true." No tag. No mention. Just her face, her brand, my work. The comments were already rolling in. Heart emojis, fire emojis, congratulations from people we'd gone to school with. I stared at it until the words blurred, then shut my phone off entirely. I don't know how long I lay there after that. At some point, the rain outside got heavier, drumming against the window pane. I pulled the quilt over my head, wishing I could block it all out. The betrayal, the humiliation, the gnawing awareness that I'd handed her everything she needed to erase me. The phone rang. Not the cheerful ping of a text, the sharp trill of an actual phone call. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number from California. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my chest tugged. I swiped to answer. "Hello." A woman's voice, steady but cautious. "Is this Callie Morgan?" "Yes." "This is Leah Conway. I'm an assistant with the Westbridge Talent Collective. You don't know me, but I was at the cafe this afternoon." My grip on the phone tightened. "With the Scout?" "Yes," she said carefully. I couldn't help noticing. Some of the stitching techniques in the portfolio Marissa showed us. I recognized them. They were in an article you wrote for Stitch and Form magazine last year. I sat up, pulse kicking up. You read that? Twice. And I've never seen anyone else use your binding method, except in those designs today. Her voice lowered. Callie, I don't know what's going on between you two, but something about the whole meeting didn't sit right with me. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, the quilt sliding into my lap. For the first time all day I felt something other than anger or shame. A flicker of possibility. What exactly are you saying? I asked. There was a pause, then Leah said, I think you should come to quietly. If what I suspect is true, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep after that call. By the time the first light slipped through the blinds, the air in my apartment felt stale, heavy with questions I wasn't ready to answer. The bakery downstairs was already in full swing, the scent of fresh sourdough drifting up through the floorboards. Normally I'd wander down in my slippers for a croissant and coffee, but today the idea of small talk made my skin itch. Leah's words kept replaying in my mind. I think you should come to LA. Quietly. I didn't know this woman. For all I knew, she could have been fishing for gossip or worse, trying to get me to show my hand so Marissa could shut me down before I started. But there was something in her voice. Not pity, not condescension, just a calm certainty that I wasn't imagining what had happened. I made coffee, sat at my cluttered work table, and stared at the spools of thread and half-finished sketches scattered across its surface. My hands itched to start sewing, to pour the ache in my chest into something tangible, but the thought of creating anything under my own name felt dangerous. Like Marissa could sniff it out and find a way to claim that too. By late morning I'd gone through every possible reaction. Anger, disbelief, bargaining with myself, before finally landing on a cold, quiet resolve. I wasn't going to scream at her. I wasn't going to post a long, self-righteous Instagram essay. If I was going to take back what was mine, it had to be in a way that left no doubt. At noon my phone buzzed again, this time it was Marissa. Drinks tonight? I owe you a toast for putting up with my stress. I read it 3 times, the casual cheer of it so surreal I almost laughed. She wanted me there. In her world. In her glow. Probably so she could bask in her own narrative of us as partners, while she climbed a ladder she'd built on my back. And maybe that was exactly where I needed to be. I typed back, sure. What time? The rest of the afternoon I sketched. Not for her, not for me, at least not directly. These were designs she'd never resist borrowing. Sleek silhouettes, intricate detailing, colors chosen with the kind of intuition she always praised me for having. Each piece included something subtle but unmistakable. A hidden stitching signature I'd been using for years, now formally registered under my name. If she took the bait, and I knew she would, anyone who looked closely enough would see the truth. And if Leah was right about the people in LA, they would look closely. By the time I left for the bar that night, the city was wrapped in a damp chill, streetlights casting halos in the mist. I walked fast, hands shoved in my pockets, my mind already rehearsing the casual way I'd mention the new designs. Not too eager. Not too guarded. Just enough for her to think she was pulling one over on me again. The bar was one of her favorites. Dim lighting, craft cocktails, a back corner booth where she could hold court like a queen. She was already there when I arrived, hair shining under the amber glow, glass of champagne in hand. Callie, she said, all warmth and open arms. You came. Her perfume hit me like a memory. Summer nights in Providence, the two of us sewing with the windows open, laughter spilling into the street. For a split second I almost forgot why I was there. Then she smiled, that smile, the one that said she'd already decided the ending of this story, and I remembered. She slid a champagne flute toward me as I slipped into the booth. To new beginnings, she said, her tone light, eyes glittering like the toast was for both of us. I lifted my glass but didn't drink. Big week for you, I said. She tilted her head just enough to make her earrings catch the light. You know how it is. Timing, connections, a little talent. That little was deliberate, a faint smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. I saw your post, I said. 3 years of work, huh? She didn't flinch. It's been a journey. No apology, no awkward pause. Just pure ownership of something she knew wasn't hers. I let the silence hang for a beat before I leaned forward. I've been working on something new, I said, keeping my voice almost casual. A small capsule line. I wasn't sure I'd even show it to anyone yet. Her interest sharpened instantly, though she tried to mask it by swirling the champagne in her glass. What kind of pieces? Minimalist silhouettes, I said. Custom handwork. Something you can't mass-produce without losing the soul of it. I watched her face carefully. She loved anything that made her sound exclusive. Sounds promising, she said, her gaze fixed on me in that calculating way she had when she was deciding if something could be hers. You should bring it by some time, I added. If you think it fits with what you're showing in LA, maybe you could fold it in, she finished for me, smiling like we'd just shared the same idea at the same time. I let myself smile back, the kind you give when you're pretending someone's doing you a favor. Exactly. We talked for another hour, but the real conversation was happening in the spaces between words. She dropped hints about her upcoming meetings and potential investors, little reminders that she was the one moving forward. I nodded along, feeding her just enough detail about the capsule line to keep her curious. When she got up to take a call outside, I sat there in the dim booth, watching the condensation slide down my glass. My heart was steady now. She thought she was weaving me back into her story as a supporting character. But I was already writing a new ending. It didn't take long. 2 days after the bar, she texted me. Hey superstar. Can you send over some shots of that capsule line? Thinking it could really round out my LA presentation. She added a winking emoji, the kind she used when she was dressing up something selfish as fun between friends. I waited 3 hours before replying, long enough for her to start wondering if I'd say yes. I'll bring them by tomorrow, I wrote. Photos don't really do them justice. When I arrived at her loft, the space looked like the set of a lifestyle shoot. Plants draped artfully across open shelving, half-empty wine glasses on the counter like the remains of a glamorous night in. She swept me into a hug before I could step inside, her eyes immediately darting to the garment bag slung over my shoulder. Let me see, she said, already reaching. I unzipped the bag slowly, pulling out the first piece. A black silk slip dress with intricate lattice stitching at the hem. She ran her fingers over it, nodding approvingly. Gorgeous. This will photograph beautifully. Kept my tone light. Each piece has something a little personal. You know me, always hiding Easter eggs. He barely heard me. She was already reaching for the next dress, then the next. She lined them up across her couch, snapping photos from different angles. What she didn't notice, what she never noticed, were the tiny details. The hidden threadwork inside each hem, my registered signature pattern. The kind of thing only a trained eye would catch, and only if they were looking for it. By the time I'd shown her the last piece, she was practically vibrating. Callie, these are exactly what I need. The LA panel is going to lose their minds. There was what I need. Not we. Not us. I smiled like we were still in on the same secret. I'm glad you think so. She promised to credit me in her own way, something vague about letting people know she'd had help. I nodded like that was enough, knowing full well she had no intention of following through. And that was fine. Because soon she wouldn't get the choice. 2 weeks later, Marissa was on a flight to Los Angeles. I knew because she posted every second of it. Airport latte seat selfie, the wing of the plane framed against the sunrise with the caption #ChasingDreams. I stayed quiet. I didn't like LA's humidity anyway. But Leah had been keeping me updated. The Westbridge Talent Collective's panel was set for Friday morning. Industry scouts, established designers, and at least one journalist from Mode and Measure, a trade publication with a reputation for thoroughness. Just be ready, Leah had told me on the phone. If she uses your pieces, someone here will notice. On Thursday evening, I got a text from Marissa. You'd die if you saw this place. Everyone is obsessed with the capsule line. He saved me, Cal. Saved her. She didn't even realize she'd just admitted that her own work wouldn't have been enough. I typed back, glad they like it. Knock him dead tomorrow. Friday morning, I sat at my work table in Portland, coffee cooling beside my sewing machine, refreshing the Westbridge Collective's event hashtag every few minutes. The photos started trickling in around noon. Marissa on stage, confident as ever, a microphone in one hand and my silk slip dress draped over the other arm. She was telling the story of her inspiration, smiling wide for the cameras. I zoomed in on one shot, the hem clearly visible. My signature stitching winked back at me from the stage lights. Somewhere in that audience Leah was watching too. And she knew exactly what she was looking at. By late afternoon, the first whisper hit social media. A niche but influential account that specialized in design forensics. People who could tell a knockoff from 20 feet away, posted a side-by-side comparison. The hem of Marissa's dress and a close-up from an old Stitch and Form article featuring my work. The caption was short. These stitches tell a story. Not hers. By Saturday morning, the post had spread far beyond the design nerd corners of the internet. Now it was being shared by fashion bloggers, small indie labels, even a couple of ex-classmates who'd worked with us back at RSD. The comments were a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Looks identical. Anyone know the real designer? If this is what it looks like, yikes. Callie Morgan's name keeps coming up. Can someone confirm? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The internet was doing exactly what it always did when it smelled a story. It kept digging. Leah called mid-morning, her voice low but tight with satisfaction. She knows something's up. She's been pacing backstage all morning on the phone with someone. I'm guessing a lawyer. But she can't take those pieces off the rack now without looking guilty. Because they are guilty, I said. Leah's voice warmed. Exactly. Listen, the panel's follow-up session is this afternoon. That's when they'll do the Q&A. If someone asks her about the signature stitches, she won't be able to fake her way through it. By noon, more side-by-sides had surfaced. Clearer ones this time. One was from my senior project in college, another from a boutique show in Providence 2 years ago. Every stitch, every curve matched. Marissa posted a single story in response. A black screen with the words "haters gonna hate" in white text. Not exactly a denial. The Q&A started at 2. Leah texted me updates in real time. They're asking about your stitches. She's saying you helped, but it was collaborative. Panel's not buying it. Then one message that made me pause. They just asked if she had permission to use registered designs. She froze. I could picture it perfectly, Marissa's polished veneer cracking just enough for the room to see the panic underneath. By late afternoon, the headlines had shifted from glowing reviews to speculation. Emerging designer under fire for creative ownership dispute. Who really designed the LA Buzz collection? And my phone was starting to buzz, not with gossip but with interview requests. I wasn't planning to go to LA. But when the third journalist in 2 hours called asking if I'd like to clarify my role in Marissa's capsule line, something in me shifted. If she wanted the spotlight so badly, fine. Let's stand in it together. By Sunday morning, I was on the first flight out of Portland. Leah picked me up from LAX, her sunglasses doing a poor job of hiding the grin on her face. She's rattled, Leah said as we merged onto the freeway. After yesterday's Q&A, half the panel wants a formal investigation. The other half already thinks she's toast. And Marissa? Still insisting it was a collaboration. But the stitching proof. Callie, it's airtight. We drove straight to the Westbridge venue. The lobby buzzed with the last day's events. Designers hauling garment bags, assistants juggling coffee trays, industry types air-kissing in the hallways. I spotted Marissa instantly. She was by the registration desk, phone in one hand, her free hand slicing the air as she argued with someone. Her hair was immaculate, her outfit flawless, but there was a strain in her smile when she saw me. Callie, she said, drawing out the syllables like we were still best friends. What are you doing here? Kept my voice even. Thought I'd support you. Big weekend, right? Her eyes flicked to Leah, then back to me. This thing online? It's getting blown out of proportion. Is it? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you presented registered designs under your own name. For a moment, her mask slipped, just enough for me to see the flash of anger underneath. Then it was back. You're really going to do this here? In front of everyone? I glanced around. Heads were already turning. The hum of lobby chatter had shifted, tuned to the frequency of our voices. You chose the venue the moment you stepped on that stage with my work, I said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. We can fix this. I'll tag you in the posts, we'll say you were my head seamstress. I laughed. Not loud but sharp enough to cut the air between us. Head seamstress. It's cute. But no. We're not rewriting this story again. Before she could answer, Leah's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then at me. Panel wants to see both of you. Now. The conference room was bright and cold, The kind of space designed to make you feel small no matter how big your name was. 8 members of the Westbridge Talent Collective sat in a row at the far end of the long table, their nameplates lined up like chess pieces. Marissa and I were seated across from them, Leah standing discreetly by the door. Ms. Delacroix, the woman in the center began, flipping open a file. As you know, several questions have been raised about the ownership of the designs you presented on Friday. Marissa smiled like she was greeting an old friend. Of course, this was a collaborative effort. Callie and I. Collaborative? The man to her right interrupted. He slid a printout across the table. It was a side-by-side comparison. My Stitch and Form article from 2 years ago and a photo from her LA runway rack. Can you explain why these registered stitch patterns appear identically in your collection, under your sole credit? I didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched her face. She picked up the paper, scanning it like maybe the evidence would vanish if she stared hard enough. Callie worked under my creative direction. I leaned forward. Under your direction? You mean the same way I worked under your direction in college? In Providence? In Portland? Because if that's what you call it, then yes, I've been under your direction for nearly a decade. One of the panelists tapped a second folder. We've also reviewed the intellectual property filings. These stitch patterns are registered to Ms. Morgan, not to you or your business entity. That registration predates this collection by almost 3 years. Marissa's tone hardened. Look, fashion is an exchange of ideas. We've both contributed to each other's work. And yet, the woman in the center cut in. The capsule line presented here contained no credited contribution to Ms. Morgan. In fact, her name does not appear on any documentation submitted to Westbridge. Silence. The kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. The man with the file folded his hands. Ms. Delacroix, in light of this evidence, the panel has voted unanimously to disqualify your entry and remove you from the mentorship program. Effective immediately. Marissa's head whipped toward me. You set me up. I didn't blink. No. You set yourself up. I just gave you the rope. A couple of panelists shifted in their seats, trying to hide their reactions. Leah by the door didn't bother to hide her smile. The center panelist spoke again. Ms. Morgan, if you're willing, we'd like to speak with you about presenting your own work at next season's expo. Under your name. For the first time in days my chest felt light. Yeah, I said, never breaking eye contact with Marissa. I'm willing. The press release went out within the hour. It was short, clinical, and devastating. The Westbridge Talent Collective has terminated designer Marissa Delacroix's participation in the mentorship program following verified intellectual property violations. By that evening it was everywhere. Industry blogs, fashion news sites, even a couple of mainstream outlets that loved a scandal with pretty pictures. Side-by-side comparisons of my Stitch and Form article and her LA runway photos became the viral centerpiece of the week. Marissa's Instagram, once a curated gallery of polished shots and breathless captions, was suddenly flooded with comments. So disappointing. How much of your stuff is actually yours? Unfollowed. Plagiarism isn't style. By midnight she turned off comments completely. Meanwhile my inbox was a different story. Messages from small boutiques asking about commissions. Invitations to interview for design houses I'd only dreamed about. A note from the Mode and Measure journalist, asking if I'd consider telling my side of the story for an upcoming feature. I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't know how much I wanted to say publicly. I'd already gotten what I came for. Proof. Proof that she couldn't erase me without leaving a trace. 3 days later I was back in Portland, sitting at my work table with a cup of tea and my sewing machine humming softly. The bakery downstairs had just pulled a tray of cinnamon rolls from the oven. The scent curled up through the floorboards like a reminder that life could be simple again. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You didn't have to destroy me. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at it for a long time, the cursor blinking in the reply box. Part of me wanted to write back to explain that she'd done the destroying herself. Another part wanted to ignore it entirely. Instead I typed 2 words. We rise. And I hit send. A month later the rain finally broke over Portland. I walked through the Pearl District with my tote slung over one shoulder, sunlight glinting off the shop windows. A boutique on the corner had just updated its front display. 3 mannequins wearing my designs from the capsule line. This time the placard read exactly what it should. Callie Morgan, Originals. I stepped inside. The owner, a woman named Nora with sharp eyes and a sharper memory, smiled when she saw me. "They've been selling before we can restock," she said. "You're going to need more fabric." It still felt strange hearing my name without it being an afterthought, a whispered footnote to someone else's story. The industry had already moved on to its next scandal, but traces of Marissa's fallout lingered. Rumors said she'd moved back east, taken a retail job, maybe even tried to start a line under a different name. If she did, she'd have to work twice as hard to make anyone forget what had happened in LA. I didn't wish her well. I didn't wish her ill. Mostly, I didn't wish her anything at all. That night, I sat at my work table, the window open to the warm spring air. The hum of the city outside was faint, distant, just enough to remind me it was there. On the table lay a new sketchbook, its first page still blank. I ran my fingers over it, remembering all the late nights, the sacrifices, the moments I thought my work, and maybe I, would never matter. Now I knew better. Not because of the applause or the orders or the headlines, but because I'd learned something Marissa never had. It's not the spotlight that makes you untouchable. It's the truth you can prove and the patience to wait for the right moment to show it. I picked up my pencil and began to draw. This time the work and the name on it would be mine from the very first stitch.